Okay, so I thought we would have a look at the O Canada song. So here I have the French version, and here I have the English version, and we're gonna do a little game of follow along. So this is O Canada, so in French, O Canada, obviously. Our own and native land, true patriot love and all of us command. In French it says, car ton bras s'est terre de nos aïeux, ton front est ceint de fleurons glorieux. So maybe we'll do each one and explain a little bit. Okay, we'll do each one. So our own native land, true patriot love. So we love being Canadian. With glowing hearts, we see thee rise. So obviously, there's a lot about religion. True north, strong and free. So we're free. We're proud people, proud of being Canadian. From far and wide. So the land is far and wide. A little bit like the U.S. You know, it's a very big territory, especially compared to like Europe. We stand on guard, so we're protecting the land. God keep our land glorious and free. So we love God, apparently. This is more religious than Canada actually is, but it sort of gives it a patriotic and a religious edge to it, you know? And standing on guard for the standing on guard, that's that like reflects the queen, right? We're standing on guard for the queen, we're standing on guard for the royalty. If you contrast here with the French version, so Au Canada, terre de nos aïeux, ton front est ceint de fleurons glorieux. So this is our historical land, so where our ancestor lived. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, s'est porté la croix. That's the God. That's our God. That's the Catholic God. The God in English would be the Protestant God. So it's a different God. It's the French God, right? Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. So your history is an odyssey, basically, and it's full of great moments. So already twice here, saying like our ancestors lived here saying like talking about history. We're talking a lot more about history than the English version one was, because here it's talking about a commander. It's talking about standing on guard, like this is the army, right? So this is more about history, because the French people have been here a little bit longer than the English people, and also we're proud of our history, and we don't really care about standing on guard for the queen. And we love the queen, but we don't really care about it. And yes, I'm saying the queen because I still don't accept the new king as my rightful ruler, right? I think we should have went out of it. Okay. Ta valeur de foi trempée protégera nos foyers et nos droits. So now it's saying like our faith is the thing that will protect us. So here it's saying like we stand on guard and God is helping us protect our country. Here it's saying literally, if you have faith, we will be protected. Yeah. And it's not only our house that will be protected, it's our rights. And that's very important to understand. We're starting this Canada lesson. This is a real quick Canada lesson. Okay? I don't know how long it'll take, but this is a real quick French Canada lesson. So far, what we know about French Canada is they love their history. They love God, and they love having faith. And why is that? You know? Why that is historically why we kept the French language in Quebec, in French Canada, as other people call it, is because of the religion, right? So that's the basis of understanding Quebec, is historically religion helped us keep our language, keep our culture, and because we were able to keep our language, we were also able to keep our rights. So French Canada law is not the same as English Canada law. English Canada law is closer to Commonwealth law. It's closer to the way law works in the US. Obviously, it's not based on the same cases and all of that, but it's like a similar way to similar process from England, similar process to the US. Whereas French Canada, we kept the rights, we kept the laws, the way to do law from France. So English law is based on history, and it's based on what was done, observation and adjudications. And French law is more prescriptive. It's based on a law book that you read and you interpret those laws. It's a bit different. Yeah. I don't know if you get the nuance. So it's the same with the language. Like English language is based on conversation, it's based on usage, it's based on what people are doing, how they're talking. And French language is based on a prescriptive dictionary and prescriptive rules that come straight from France. You know? So it's like, in some ways, culturally, English language and English culture and English law is more democratic, and French laws, French language is more prescriptive, is more authoritarian in that way, you know? You know, it's like you listen to the father, your father tells you what to do. So that's France a little bit. And then you have England on the other side that's more like, well, okay, this is what you do, what you're doing, and we'll just tell you to keep doing what you, sort of, you know? But historically, Papa England didn't want a French part of his city, a French part of the country to exist. So there's a lot of history of trying to tamp down French, and we're going to try to go from the start to the beginning, from the beginning to the end, to today. But I just wanted to give a general context of the teams, because I want to do just a real quick history. Like, it'll just take a minute, okay? It's just the basis, like the highlights of Canadian history. Well, you know, French Canadian, because I don't really know how they teach it on the English side. So how it works on the French side is you have France until about 1500, 1600 with the foundation of Quebec. We follow pretty much only what happens in France. And then after Louis XV, which was the best king in the world, he was called the Sun King. He was like the best king, the best. He was like the best. He was the center of his world. And we don't really talk about France after Louis XV. So while Louis XV was in power, there was a lot of information in Quebec. And at some point, after Louis XIV, Louis XIV, yeah, it's 14, sorry, as Sun King Louis XIV. At some point during his reign, or that was when, I'll look at the date, just to not confuse you too much, but Quebec history, I'll give you some dates, because, like, I know the facts, I just don't know all the dates, but, like, there's okay, like, the dates don't really matter, you can do your own research, okay, but, like, at some point during Louis XIV's rule, or a little bit after, there was a war between France and England, and during that war, they signed the Traité de Paris. The Traité de Paris. I can find a date for that, actually. So de Paris. So that's 1763. 1763 France. 763 in France, who the king? What? George III? Non. What? Qui règne en France? So Louis XV. Louis XV? Louis XV, is he the Sun King or is it 14? No, so that's the guy after Louis XIV. So, okay, okay, to explain to you why this is important is because when we got traded under Louis XV, which was the son on Louis XIV, Louis XV was the best king, he was the best, he was like the center of culture, he was the center of his world, he was the center of everything. Then you have the Louis XV, which was like a little bit more, there was a little bit more bourgeois press, so like the people who actually made money, there was enough press, it was starting to brew. And then when Louis XVI, so just after Louis XIV, there's Louis XVI, this is the guy where shit broke out and they started just killing all the nobles, right? I just want to make that clear because France was like in the 17th century, they were like maybe it's 18, I don't know, like so Traité de Paris. So since we were put for adoption, given to England during Louis XV, we weren't there with France while the revolution was happening. Like, it was still, like, we were still aware of it, but we weren't affected by it. And in some way, that's very lucky. In some ways, that's kind of weird. Because we weren't there for the revolution, we split off culturally from France, right? In France, they started to be more pro people. They started to be more to follow the French accent from Paris. And that's a big, big reason why Quebec and France don't have the same accent, is because Quebec kept the accent of whatever how they were talking during the royal years, like how the people were talking for the royal years, and France started to use the Parisian accent, which was very, very different. So this is Paris investing in the language of the people of Paris and spreading that out, while in Quebec you have like some faithful people to the crown, some people who were talking in a way they could communicate with the kings, doing their own things. That's why it's split off really, really, the split off is really, really stark if you compare with like Africa, like the African country, we're still tied to France. They speak more similarly to France. And if you compare like the Antilles, it's like a different context. It's about like slavery and all of that. And that's why they speak the way they speak, is because it's the Creole, the like creolization of French. It comes from the slavery. It comes from mixing those African language with French, right? So just like quick summary, you know? So in Quebec, you have these French people that still would want to be with France, you know? And now they're under English rule. And that's a big problem for them. It's a big problem for the English. So you have this clash that's happening in Quebec towards, so at this point it's called Canada. Like before it gets called Quebec and all of that, the country is called Canada. It's a French country called Canada. And then you have the English arriving, and you have, and then they go, and this is Lower Canada and Upper Canada. Like in French, we call it Au Canada, Bas Canada. Yeah? So you have Upper Canada, you have Lower Canada. Upper Canada is English, it's Ontario today, basically. And you have Lower Canada, that is French. And what they want to achieve is put the French down, so they start speaking English, and they want to do what they did in the US. So in the US, because there was a lot more, they had a lot more territory, there was a lot more of English people there, they were able to make English the main language for the most part, right? You have like certain areas that are more French, but in general, like it's considered that US is an English country, even though there's a lot of Spanish now, and there's historical French places like Louisiana. These changed. You know, the territory of France, of Quebec, of Canada, while it was French, stretched all the way to Louisiana. It was a very big territory, but it was not that well, there was not that many people. It was really, really more like people just running around in the forest and killing bears and beavers and all of these animals to get pelts to send back to France. It was more like it was more a place they were just pulling wrestlers from than a place that was actually habited. It was under the rule of these companies. So now when there was an effort by Louis XIV and 15 to really actually put people here, you know, there was a lot. So there was they were called like les filles du roi. It's like the king's daughters. They were like orphan girls that would have been sent to like become nuns in the monastery or that type of thing. They were sent here to start family with the men who were there to hunt, to do the hunt, to do all these things. So now there was like a real effort to settle, and that's why when you arrived at the Traité de Paris, there's a permanent population here, close to Quebec, close to Montreal. These areas, and like Trois-Rivières, I think as well. There's bigger settlements of French people, and French people is starting to come together to be a real place that has a permanent population. Like there are a lot of things that happened where French people moved away. While the US was doing move to the west, a lot of French people moved from Quebec, moved from Canada and whatever. They moved from Quebec to the US, or they moved towards Vancouver. So actually Vancouver has a big French population that's just there now. It's not as big as Quebec. Obviously Quebec is still the main hub, but it's just like there's a lot of small French community all over Canada. So that's something to keep in mind. If Quebec were to split from Canada, all of those French community, they would be forgotten about, right? They wouldn't initially have the same services they do now, because right now in the law it says if there's a French community, they have to have the French school, they have to have the access to Radio Canada, as French CBC, they have to have access to those French news. So if Quebec leaves, there's no more support for French. Well, there will still be, right? This is just different, right? It doesn't mean like it would stop completely. It just, they wouldn't spend money helping those small communities keep their French. Doesn't mean they would lose it, right? Like Louisiana's still French, and they still have access to French school, and they're still doing like that community work. Like it's not it's not because there's no like state support that it still isn't done. Like if you take like the Mohawk language from Kanawage and all that, those things, it's still being spoken because the Mohawk communities are making Mohawk school and teaching their historical language. So that's why you still have people able to speak those languages that they had before. But the Mohawks were on the English side. So the English made alliances with the Mohawk and other tribes. And the French people made alliances with mainly the Algonquians. And that's why Mohawk historically English. You know, Algonquians historically French. You know, they still were speaking their original language, but they were on one side or the other. I know I'm giving a lot of information going really quickly. I just want to give you a picture of what it's like in Quebec now. So moving forward, you have O Canada, Bas Canada, and they're clashing together. O Canada is trying to tamp down the French. They're trying to mix together and everyone speak English. They want everyone as much as possible to speak English. So Papa England, Papa Canada wants everyone to speak English now. It's the England wants English, and the French wants to keep their French. So you have emotional and economical bullying happening towards French Canada, trying to say, okay, well, you want to speak French, but you know, it makes more sense business-wise that every poster, every store name, everything is in English. So you're French, but you live in a city where everything's in English. And then your boss is probably English, either from the US or from Canada. He's English. So all the leaders are English until about the 60s. In the 60s, when they tried to separate, they tried to affirm as well their rights to talk French. So they asked for all the advertising, the store names to be in French first and English small and below, right? But it doesn't change the history of most companies in Quebec are still English, are still from Canada or from the US. It's very, very rare for a company in Quebec or in Canada to be actually, well, in Quebec it's very, very rare for a company to be actually Québécois, to be actually French from Canada, French Canada. And when we do have those, they get sold to the US or to Canada, to English Canada. So, like, we had Saint-Hubert, which is like a chicken place, a little similar to Swiss Chalet, and they were bought by Swiss Chalet recently, because, like, there was no one in the Saint-Hubert family who wanted to take over the company. There was another company for bicycle called Louis Garneau, and this also was sold to probably Americans because Louis Garneau's son, they didn't want to take over. So we lost a lot of companies that were ours, that were either Québécois or Canadian. Like L'Abbé was Canadian. It was a very Canadian company, but it was sold as well. It's like we lost a lot of big Canadian brands to the US, you know? And it's kind of crazy to think that so many of these brands that people associate with Canada are not even Canadian now. And it's kind of crazy to think that. But some of them were bought by other Canadian companies, so it's less bad, but it's still like we're losing these French companies, we're losing these these companies founded here to outsiders now, you know? Anyways, so it's a bit weird living in Quebec and seeing all of those things, form up. And like when you're feeling put down by the rest of Canada and all of that, it's hard to not be like, well, I would like to do my own thing. I would like to speak French. I would like to be able to do my own work. So that's why Quebec was like, it was very, very religious. And because of the religion, we were able to keep the French. They were keeping the French alive. And because there was a big French population, it's the second reason we were able to keep the French. Is big expanding population that gave us a lot of weight on the Canada scale. That's another reason French was able to be kept. So it was religion and family values. And now religion is down and family values are down. So the French situation in Quebec is more dire than ever, basically. It's really, really dire. It's really, really bad. Numbers of people learning French are going down, and it's really, really bad. But what they are doing to try to bring the number up is very, very bad for English people and people of color. Okay? I'll just try to explain it. So, I live in Montreal. Montreal is very bilingual. We have a very diverse population. But the laws of Legault is the leader of Quebec right now. Those laws go against, they discriminate against English people. They force English people, they pay more for university if you want to do university here. They say you have to learn French. You can't learn any other languages as your second language. So if you're like English, Spanish, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to learn French. They're saying in some situation, they're also just straight up saying I don't care if you come from the US, if you come to live in Quebec and you send your kids to school in Quebec and you come from the US because your parents were not born in Canada and they're not historically English, they just teach that kid French. I had a friend in my class that was from Brooklyn and basically got parachuted into a French class. And that's crazy. He should have totally gone to the English school. It was quite good in French, but he comes from Brooklyn. It's you're putting that kid through literal torture, trying to, at the same time, learn a language and learn all of his subjects. So if he were to struggle at French, he would struggle with everything else, since all of his class, all except English as a second language, are in French, he just has to go full tilt learning French, and he's to just be able to understand what all of his teachers are talking about. This is crazy. This is crazy talk. I know Quebec wants to keep the French language, but this is crazy. This is like someone from the outside looking in or coming to Quebec, discovering they have to do all of these things, that their child has to do all of these things, that they have to do a French class, that the government wants immigrants to do the French class, to do all of that. And it's crazy to ask for that. It's really crazy to ask to learn French. Because, let's face it, French is only useful here. It's not useful anywhere else in Canada. It's not useful for business in general. It's not useful online. It's not useful for anything other than working in Quebec, right? It's so crazy living here. Honestly, It's really, really crazy. Let's just see if there's um yeah, I know you all have a message saying like, can you teach us about US history? It's just I really want people to know more about my side of things because people in the US they don't know about French Canada. They really don't care about French Canada. Like even Canada doesn't care about French Canada. And I don't know if you're still here, Push Roberts, but I would want people to know about it, and maybe I can do future video on US stuff. But it's like the Canada situation, the Quebec situation, it's really not talked about that much. You know? You're not gonna go to class and learn about it. I went to class and I learned about it because I live here, right? I live in Quebec. That's the only reason I learned about French Canada history. Otherwise, you don't learn about it at all. I know you would want me to talk about your country, but I'm trying to tell you a little bit about the highlights of my country so people can understand it better. Just a little bit, you know? It's just a small thing. It's just gonna take a couple minutes, and then I'm gonna talk about other stuff. I'm gonna do other stuff, but right now, I'm just gonna finish the lesson, right? Um, anyways, I don't know when he was there. Like not looking at chat. I'm such a bad streamer. Okay. Anyways, so just to understand a little bit the Quebec position. So this is basically a PSA to one person in particular. I would like, if possible, to talk to JJ McCullough. Because JJ McCullough makes great videos about the history of Canada from his English point of view. And he did a video where he talked to a separatist Québécois from the French side. Well, I'm here. I'm in Montreal. I'm in the middle of Quebec wanted to separate and be on their own, to be French. And this is not a good thing, in my mind, to separate from Canada, because those separatist people are really, really kind of racist. No, like, to be honest, I find their policies against the English, against people of other culture, a little bit iffy. I don't like it at all. This patriotic feeling seems a little bit like also protecting not just the culture, not just the language, but protecting the people that are from here, that have French blood. So it goes against the immigration, it goes against the English. And I really don't like that, because in Montreal, the thing we are the most is diverse. It's a diverse group of people. And I would really, really want to sit down and talk to JJ and ask him questions and explain it to him that, yes, there's separatist Québécois who want nothing to do with England. Canada, sorry. And there's English people who want nothing to do with French. And yes, it's really, really bad that right now the balance of power has shifted from French Canada not being worth anything to now French Canada has basically all of the power. And from Quebec's point of view, this is a good thing. And from the English side, this is not seen as a good thing. And I understand that. I would like to sit down with him and just talk it out, see what he thinks about it. It's just, from my point of view, it's like people don't really understand what French Canada went through and what it's still going through and what's happening right now, right? And this is basically an application for me to go and talk to you, JJ McCullough, I would want to sit down and talk with you, okay? And it's just a PSA, historical sort of look, a quick look, glossing over a lot of history, right? Of Quebec, of French Canada. Why is Canada bilingual? It's because French Canada was able to keep that language, to keep those culture, to keep the French alive, through religion, through all of that. And right now, what's brewing in Canada is that feeling of making Canada great again. And what's going up from separatism is returning to France. Basically, it's like splitting off Canada, Quebec. Quebec would probably want to return and basically be with France again. Like, they have big trauma of being abandoned by France, and they want to get back to that. And you have English Canada, who would want just the French people to shut up, basically, and stop trying to make waves, right? They're like, calm down. I'm gonna let you stay in my house, but don't make too much trouble, right? So it's just, you know, I don't have all the dates. I don't have all the facts, obviously, but in general, that is the feeling I have as someone from Quebec, as someone from Montreal, that in Montreal you have those two things clashing together, the English side and the French side clashing together, and we need to find a balance between the two. Like, we need to reach down and find a balance. I think it's possible. I much prefer Quebec to be part of Canada because I like Canada and the diversity and all of those values. I don't like everything about Canada, obviously, but like, I like those values that Trudeau was pushing. I like those values that the NPD is pushing with inclusion and all of that. Like, NPD even has a Sikh, someone from the Sikh religion as their leader. So those are very good values that from Quebec, the Legault administration doesn't have. He just wants Quebec to be more French, to be more pure-blooded in a weird way, right? So that's just a little topo. It's just a real quick 40-minute video. Really quickly, before I end up, I just want to say, in my opinion, in my sincere opinion, what I would want from Quebec is to be more accepting of English people, of people from other religion, of those people who come from other countries, and give them the choice to learn French or to not learn French. I get that we're very, very worried about losing that language. I know this. Like, I get it. But isn't there another way to make them want to learn French? Right? I don't know if this is the way. This just scares people away. And our French population is going down. And we need the immigration to go up to balance it out. So by doing those policies, it's just bringing tourism, it's just bringing that immigration down, and it's not compensating enough for our population number to go up. So that means as our population number drops, Canada has less and less motivation to listen to us, and they could just be like, well, I don't care. Now Canada is just English. So if we want population number to go up, is we have to risk losing French as our only language in Quebec. But I think it would create a different type of country. It would create a more united country as well if we just do what we're saying we want to do, of like bring everyone together. I know that means French is gonna go down, but I don't know if by doing all of those policy, French is gonna bounce back magically. I think what's gonna happen is French is still gonna go down, and at the same time, the population is also going down, right? So right now, everything's going down. French people are learning French less because there's less free people being born knowing French and teaching French to their kids, and English is going down because people don't want to live here uh, in English because it kind of sucks with all the policies we're making. And if we were able to raise our population up, yes, French would keep going down, you know, but at least, Quebec would still exist in some ways, right? I don't know. I just think it's crazy to me that the solution from the French side is, make more rules, make it more annoying to live here speaking English or any other language than French. That's not a good solution. That's not gonna boost our numbers of population. That's not gonna bring people in, right? It's like, there's no good solution to keep the French, but there would be a solution to keep existing as a part of Canada in a way that we decide is correct, that we would decide that this is the way. To me, this is the way. Yes, we lose a little bit of French, but I think French language in general kind of sucks. I'm gonna be honest. It kind of sucks to be French. Compared to being English, it kind of sucks being French because French is not spoken anywhere compared to English. So it kind of sucks being French. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. It just sucks, right? It's like, I think Quebecois culture is wonderful. I think French culture is wonderful. But I think being born French doesn't bring you anything. Like, you're only able to work in Quebec. If you only speak French, you're only able to work in Quebec. And you're not necessarily even able to work in Montreal. Like in Montreal, to work as a French person, you have to know English. Like my father was working for French CBC that we call Radio Canada, and he had to communicate with everyone in English. So it's like any work that you do, if it's for an English company, if it's for an English brand, if you do customer service, if you have to do all of those things, you have to know English. And it's true also for English people. Like if they want to do customer service especially, they need to learn French. But even if you're not doing customer service, if you're having to have this contact with an English company, like I was a game tester, for crying out loud. I was a games tester at Square Enix, for a while. And everything we did with the main company was in English. And most of the chat was in English. And all of the reports were in English, It's like as soon as you have to communicate with somewhere else, anywhere else at all, the language of business is English. You can't avoid that. So learning French, knowing French doesn't do anything to palliate that. And basically, I don't know what to do, but I feel like separating Quebec from Canada would be really, really bad for both countries that it would create, because Quebec would be like even more patriotic, even more isolationist. They might want to exile all the English people, basically, and just become Friends 2.0. And Canada is not trying to tamp down the Quebec patriotism going up. They're like kind of letting us do our own thing, which is great, but it's not so great since we're like going in this direction right now. So what I'm hoping for the future is finding a balance between the two. And yeah, so that was just my little Quebec rant. I don't know. I'll just check real quick if anyone is in chat. I guess that person didn't stay, but yeah, like I'm not interested in doing U.S. history for the simple reason that there's a lot of channels already covering U.S. history. I like Canada's history because that's my history, and I like French history because that feels a little bit like my history as well. And I feel like people don't know a lot about French history, and it's like related to French culture, and it's way less talked about than English history, at least in English. Like, I'm sure in French you can find 3,000 people talking about French history. About French history in English, I think that's more rare, especially in Quebec. I don't think anyone's like talking about Quebec history from a Quebec point of view in English. There's a lot of English people talking about Quebec in English, but there's not a lot of lived-in experience of I live in Quebec and I can tell you about it in English. And just one last thing for funsies is just when Quebec left France, the revolution was brewing, as I said previously. The revolution happened. We were not there, basically. And a lot of people seem to think, well, I used to think that after the French Revolution, they put on the Republic, and it just starts being a democracy. Like, a lot of people are under that impression. But unlike most other countries that copied France, and just like around the same time you had England being like, let's start a democracy, but let's start a democracy that still keeps the monarchy symbolically in place. There was a lot of country around Spain, Italy, all of that, Russia, even Russia, who got their monarchies out and put the people in power. You know, the US did the same thing. They were even helped by the French to do it. They got the royals, the English, out, and the royal English came to Canada. So that's why Canada is still tied to English Britain, because those were the loyalists. The people were still in favor of the Queen or the King. I prefer saying the Queen because I think it's more fun, but it was probably a king at the time. But basically, after the French Revolution, there was the Republic. But after the Republic, they tried to bring back the royals in power. And that is crazy. So they were like, that Republic thing, I'm not so sure about. Let's bring back the royals. And that didn't really work either. So after they tried to bring back the royal, they were like, let's do a republic again. But then they elected this guy called Napoleon. And if you know Napoleon, he just decided, I'm now emperor and you're under my rule. So they got republic, then they got royalty, and then they got a fucking emperor, you know? A fucking emperor who only cared about conquering other countries and didn't really care about running a country. Napoleon was literally just a good general for the army. Was just a good army general, and because he was emperor, he was able to do all of his wars. There's 18 different Napoleonic wars that he was able to do because he was emperor. He was saying, he was like trying to spread the the French country. But what is crazy is when Napoleon was like, when Waterloo happened. After Waterloo, there was another one where he was captured, and they were able to like make him stop being emperor, and they exiled him on an island somewhere, and then they brought the republic back. And I think that time it stuck for good, but there might be another time where they also try to bring back the royals. I'm not really sure if it was like 5 or 6 or 7 times. I don't really remember, but it really didn't stick the first time. They had to try like 5 more times. Something like that. It's kind of crazy to think that. It's kind of crazy to know that and to be like, the country that influenced every other country around to be like, let's get rid of the royals, didn't get his shit together on the first try. It took a really, really long time to get its shit together and to be a real republic, you know? Anyways, Napoleon, all the Napoleonic wars didn't achieve anything from France because all of the territory that Napoleon gained, they gave it away. They all gave it back. Everything Napoleon gained, it was all given back afterwards. Everything that was stolen by Napoleon, they tried to give as much as possible back. They still kept some stuff. Like, I'm not gonna say they didn't keep any stuff, like stealing from countries and putting stuff in museum. That's also something the English did, and they kept most of it. But France, there's a real effort. There was a real effort to return that stuff, right? But it's just so crazy because I think actually after Napoleon there was a king in France. I don't even know. Anyways, it's like something to remember is France didn't get its shit together the first time, and also Quebec is in a really messed up place in Canada, just being surrounded by everything English and still wanting to be with France, you know, still wanting to be French. And what's really messed up about it as well is French is telling us how to speak, how to write, how to exist in French, while here, like how we speak French in the street is completely different from French, how it's taught, how it's written. Even in France, it's the same thing. How they speak in the street is not the same as the dictionary. If you look at the English dictionary, it's much closer to how it's spoken. Anyways, I think I should wrap it up for now because I've been going in an hour and you probably have other stuff to do. So for your homeworks, I would ask you to first like the video if you liked it, then subscribe to the channel for future history, and lastly is to spam JJ McCullough to give me an answer. No, just kidding. Don't do that. That would be mean. But please like, subscribe, and ring that little bell if you liked it. This is not like a comedy one. It was just more a historical journey through Quebec and explaining the Quebec situation a little bit differently than people who just look at history. I'm just giving you like the highlights of how I learned it and how I feel about it, it's the lived-in experience as opposed to the historical, empirical way to teach it. I just wanted to see how people would respond to it, and as well as like a more nuanced approach than either JJ, who's from English Canada, and there was a guy he talked with from Quebec who was like very separatist, unwilling to speak in English like ever. Like, I'm perfectly bilingual in my end. Like, I could say this whole speech in French if I wanted, but I feel like French people don't need to hear it as much right now as English people. It's like I might do a PSA for francophones. It's just like trying to give that opinion without it being tied to let's also split up from Canada, right? And yeah, let's try to find a balance. Anyways, I'll let you go. Anyway, again, please like, subscribe. I don't know. I started the Patreon. I'm gonna be playing more games. I want to do more chill stuff and more like comedy. But I just wanted to get this Quebec Rant out from me, and I hope some of you will enjoy it. But I really don't know. It's just like I want to do so many things, and you know. Anyways, see you, and maybe we'll do another quick history lesson. I have one that I'm researching. It's basically just combing through Wikipedia and looking at just Canada's election, how it went, how it started, all of that. I need to finish my list of everything, and then I'm gonna give you the report. And it's really funny, actually. It's really actually funny. That one will actually be funny. This one, I think, was a bit more ranty, a bit more history teacher vibes of. But yeah, if you have any question, please leave a comment. And yes, I will at JJ. And if he wants to contact me, if he wants to talk with me, I would really enjoy that. I get that I'm a very small YouTuber and I don't know everything, but I think I can teach him more about Quebec than he knows. And my feeling about it is if I can teach people about Quebec, about the Quebec culture, about the Montreal mindset, about the diversity of people we have here, and everything, maybe it'll help smooth down those feelings from the separatists that want to bring back a more united, quote-unquote, Quebec, more French, more white as well. That's how it feels. Not saying that's literally what they want to do, but some of the policies, they fight back against the English, and they fight back against people who would prefer learning a different language than French. And there's also rules that were made that are against people wearing like big religious signs in public, and that's like to remove religion from those public places. And some of these rules might make it harder for those people of color to find work. I think they're able to find like those middle grounds, but it's just like the fact that those rules were passed in the first place. That the fact that Legault passed a bunch of laws against the English. All of these things, it doesn't create a good feeling, right? It doesn't create a feeling of inclusiveness from, the different perspective of the English. They don't feel included. And the French feel more and more isolationist, And that's just the feeling I have. it's not entirely based in fact. It's also based in feeling and vibes. And, you know, but yes, I'm gonna leave you with this. But yeah, please leave a like, subscribe, and I might do, I don't know, I might do other stuff, but I think I'll do the Canadian federal election because I started on that one. That's my next historical comedy one. And I'm gonna keep doing like random video game stream, random comedy bits. I just wanted to get it out of my head, all of these things I'm thinking about Quebec, and just see if anyone's interested to hear from someone from Quebec talking about it instead of hearing just the facts or just like the general facts from someone from the outside. And we'll see. We'll see. Anyways,